start rolling. All right, we have the legendary, the godfather of the private training industry, right? Mike Boyle, who is, I don't know how to describe him other than when it comes to personal training and making a living out of it, as far as I know, you're the first, right? You're the first guy to do athletes like that and actually to really do it for a long period of time in a sustainable way. For as far as I know, it was sustainable for a little bit for you. And you're the guy, you're the go-to guy that everyone thinks about when they want to talk about success in the industry for personal training. Like, hey, can a private trainer know enough to work with the athletes like a strength conditioning coach? Hey, Mike Boyle does it. So if Boyle can do it and he could still work with the pro athletes and you work with the college guys, that you're like the prime example that everyone goes to. So I'm pumped to have you on the show. And one more funny thing on the intro is about 4 years ago, maybe longer, I don't know, I was on a podcast, an Australian podcast called the Mind Muscle Project. And someone asked me, I forget how it came up, but I ended up saying back in the day, I thought Mike Boyle was a pussy. And and now I'm biting my tongue. I got my foot in my mouth on that one because I know exactly what he was talking about, with being as conservative with athletes as you can. And when I was younger, I was sitting there, I was like, no, you got to move heavy shit. You can't be a pussy with these single leg squats and being all conservative with this shit. And then I didn't think Mike Boyle would listen to it. I didn't think anything of it. And about 3-4 months later, I get a tweet. Mike Boyle tweets at me, goes, hey, heard the podcast. Glad you don't think I'm a pussy anymore. So we've never actually spoke face to face. We've just been exchanging tweets over the past 3-4 years. So I'm very happy to meet you face to face, Coach.
Well, it's great. I tell people that all the time. I said, these are like, Twitter is like strength and conditioning Tinder. I have internet boyfriends that I've never met. So, and you are one. So, but I have actually, it's the great part about social media is that I have developed some really good relationships. And, you meet people that are in different areas. You can, I remember why I had tweeted, you said, hey, I got some girls that are going to be down in your area that were looking to work out. You know what I mean? There's always that ability. Our ability to network is so advanced now. Like I was laughing because I had a kid the other day who was, same thing, giving me shit on Twitter about like something about, oh, you didn't keep data. Why not? And I was like, I said, do you understand that when I started, personal computers did not exist? I said, you don't understand a yellow legal pad where you're writing the test results down. Mike squatted this much, and these kids that wise ass on the internet. And I'm like, you have no conception of what it was like 40 years ago when no one was getting paid to do this. And, I started out, I volunteered in a 700 square foot closet basically, so that I could start my illustrious career.
So you said you started off in a 700 square foot closet?
Yeah, really. It was a little room. It was a storage room across from the athletic training room. I was an athletic trainer. I knew I wanted to be a strength coach. When I first went to college, the idea of being a strength coach did not exist. So 1977, I go to Field College as a freshman. And I always tell everybody, in true outliers form, I walk into my dorm. Now, I was like a high school kid, wannabe football player or whatever, kind of gotten into the weight room thing a little bit. And I was lucked out. I got exposed to scores when I was probably going into my freshman year of college, and I saw people like squatting big weight and deadlifting and cleaning. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And but my dorm director was a guy named Mike Wojcik. If you follow the National Football League at all, Mike Wojcik is tied with that old Patriots quarterback for most Super Bowl rings. He has 6 and Brady has 6.
He's down in Dallas now, right?
He's actually retired. He just retired this year in Dallas. So he's finally retired. He's probably, I'm going to be 61 in a month. He's probably 65 or 6 because he was a grad student when I was a freshman. And he and Rusty Jones were both at Springfield when I was there. So the two longest tenured guys in the history of the NFL were at Springfield College while I was there. And I became friendly with them. And, then I was like a little, snot-nosed 17-year-old freshman, because you went to college when you were 17 in those days. And I followed those guys around and pestered them and asked them questions. And then I started hanging around with Mike because he was coaching the throwers. He wasn't a strength coach either. He was the track field event coach. So I started going and working out with the throwers. So I'd have guys to work out with who wanted to lift like I wanted to lift, and started learning. Mike was doing plyos and close grip snatches. And he was light years ahead of everybody else in the world, but he was right there with me at that time. And then we had a guy that showed up to teach weight training who had just left University of Hawaii, where he was with Bill Starr. So he shows up with Strong Shall Survive as our textbook for weight training. Like the year before, it was a Nautilus class, like, where do you put the seat, to line your shoulder up with the cam. And and the year, my first year of weight training, it's literally Strong Shall Survive is the textbook, and we're learning about the big three, how to squat, how to bench, how to power clean. So I was very, very lucky that I just was in the right place at the right time really early on. And then I've been good about getting myself in the right places at the right time pretty consistently.
So from there, you said a 700 square foot closet. Where did that come from?
That was the weight room. That was the Boston University weight room for football at that time. And yeah, 700 square feet. It had 2 benches and 2 squat racks. And they had about 100 players. Because we had a pretty good, at that time, what was 1AA football. We had a pretty good 1AA team at that time. And we actually had 2 world-class throwers who literally had to train in a loft above the basketball gym. They trained by themselves, but they were, like Olympic caliber shot and discus guys. One of them, Connor McCullough, whose son is actually a pretty good shot and discus guy now, if anybody follows track and field. But we had 3 7-foot high jumpers on the same track team. We had some ridiculous athletes, but we had no facilities. And I appointed myself strength coach. I quit my athletic training job, literally walked across the hall, and kind of set down roots as the strength coach. And the first guy I run into across there, Rick Pitino, was our basketball coach at Boston University in whatever, 1982 or whatever it was. And he was into training. And it's funny, you talk about Rick Pitino was our basketball coach. Brett Brown was our point guard, who just got fired by the 76ers. And John Kuster, who I think is, I don't know if he's still coaching. He was the Pistons coach for a while, but he was our other assistant coach. And Pitino left right away. As soon as, before I ever started working with basketball, Pitino was gone. And John Kuster was like, I need a guy to do strength and conditioning for basketball. Do you want to do it? I was like, absolutely, I'm in. So suddenly here I am working with, my first job was Division I basketball, getting hired by a guy who would eventually be an NBA coach. And it's funny, our 2 guard was Sean Teague, whose kids, George Teague, and I forget the other one, but both played in the NBA. So, we ended up where I had the father of 2 NBA players and another guy who ended up being an NBA coach and a coach who ended up being an NBA coach. And I was smart enough to then become a hockey guy. So that's the story of my life.
And then what took you to the private world, Mike?
What took me to the private world, honestly, Alex, was just the fact that it's really interesting. So I started talking to some people about this. I wasn't making any money, literally, at certain points, nothing. And then eventually very little. And so in order to make a little bit more money in the summer, I pitched an idea to an agent friend of mine to train hockey guys in the summer. I said, hey, I want to train. This was probably 1989 maybe. And actually it was 90 because it was the first Final Four we had been in in the hockey program. We had made the Final Four and we had lost. So didn't play for the national championship. We were on the flight home, and there was the guy behind me was a former BU player who was an agent named Bob Murray. And I just turned around and I said, Bob, I got an idea. I want to train. I said, I want some AHL guys. I don't want any NHL guys at all. Because there were a lot of NHL guys living in Boston, and they were living high, hard partying bunch of guys who weren't going to listen to some, college guy. I said, I need AHL guys who have NHL level talent. I said, because I really think, based on what we're doing with our college guys, that we can get some of these guys in the NHL. And he sent me, I said, I want 8 guys, maybe 9 at the most. He sent me 8 or 9 guys of his clients, and 3 guys immediately made the NHL out of that group. One of whom actually, Tom Fitzgerald, the Devils GM, was one of my very first clients. His sons are my clients right now, his 2 boys. So I have like 20 second generation kids of NHL players that I coach. So, I mean, this Mike's laughing, but I mean, literally, this is how old I am, right? I'm not far. I will be alive and have a 3rd generation.
Grandfather.
Yeah. Because I've had Ray Bork's son, Chris, trains with me, and Chris has a son who's about 7 or 8 probably now who plays hockey. So in 3 or 4 years, his son, Kingston, will be in the gym, and I will be like, I coached your father and I coached your grandfather.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It really is crazy. But that's what it's great for me, because I always tell everybody what I have that everybody else doesn't have is 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, and like you said, Mike, there's some things, you know, when you were young, and Joe DeFranco will say the same exact thing. You know, there's a lot of guys who thought I was a pussy. There's a lot of guys who thought, like, this guy is such a loser. You know, all he's talking about is people getting hurt and not putting a lot of weight. Like, I was the antithesis of like the West Side, go heavy or go home, hardo, you know, with his hoodie pulled up, and, you know, and here I am saying, wait a second, you know, trust me, over the long run, this isn't going to work.
Yep.
And it got me. I caught a tremendous amount of shit. Kier is another one. I listened to Kier's podcast actually just to get familiar. But Kier was the same way. Kier just used to. I mean, I can remember it's the first time I became familiar with Kier was watching his functional training, his bullshit YouTube. You know, where he was swearing and screaming at the screen. You know, same thing about, you know. And I don't think he mentioned me by name, but it was pretty clear who he was aiming it at.
No, I'm the only schmuck that calls people out by name like that.
No, but you were kind of apologizing, so it was good. It was a better. But you know, but it's just funny because I always say to people, like, if you look at like a lot of the go heavy or go home hardo types are now functional training guys because they broke down and their clients broke down. And I wrote an article one time called "Training the Same Athlete for 17 Years." Like, I had one client, this Jay Pandolfo, who's an assistant for the Bruins now, actually played for the Devils mostly for a long time, but I literally trained him for 17 consecutive summers and watched him go from like a kid who could bench 300 pounds as a college freshman, you know, to a dumbbell benching, one leg squatting, 37-year-old NHL player, you know, and it was like the whole point was keeping him in the game. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't a weightlifting contest anymore. It wasn't like who can lift the most, because the reality is when you go to pro sports, no one cares how much. They only care if you can play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So then what's a lot of the, say, like, your bullshit meters probably increased quite a lot, right? As you've gone on.
Oh yeah.
What are you chopped out? What's all the fluff? Like, what are you keeping involved in your programs right now?
I mean, you know, so for us, we don't do we don't put a bar on anybody's back really ever anymore. Like, we don't back squat, we don't front squat, we don't do anything behind their neck. We don't, but I mean, our healthy athletes will trap our deadlift, and they'll trap our deadlift pretty healthy. We'll hang clean. I love Olympic lifting, but I've also learned that, you know, it's like the old, well, you're not a US guy, but the old Tricks cereal commercial, you know, tricks are for kids. You know, there's certain lifts that are for kids. I always tell everybody that, you know, life is a gradual journey from filet mignon to beef jerky. You know what I mean? you start out, and you're invincible, right? You're literally bulletproof, you know, and then you start kind of living on Advil and icing and, you know, trying to get around all your shit. And then eventually you start realizing, like, why am I doing this? You know, I don't really like this being sore and in pain all the time. Particularly, I think when you have your first really painful experience that doesn't go away, it starts to sober you up. I know for me, and again, I'll tell you how this goes back, how old I am. My last squat workout I did with Chris Doyle, who was up until 2 months ago, the Iowa strength coach. And I still remember I back squatted 405 for 5 with him. And the whole weekend, I felt like I had to go to the bathroom. Like, every 5 minutes I was going back in the house, like, I gotta shit my pants here, you know, and couldn't go to bed, you know, every time I go back, I'm like, I think I'm okay. And I went to see a physical therapist friend of mine. He goes, I think you got a disc or something pressing on a nerve to your intestines. He said, because, you know, you shouldn't have this constant feeling like you have to go to the bathroom. And I started thinking, I'm like, why did I have 400 pounds on my back yesterday and spend the weekend, you know, worrying about shitting my pants? right? And that was like, really, that was it for me. I don't think I picked up a heavy weight from that day forward. That was sometime like early 80s, maybe 83, 84. I don't even know what year those guys played, but I was like, I'm done. I had shoulder surgery in the 80s when they did acromionectomies. You can imagine it. That sounds pretty good, right? They cut the end of your acromion off, and the only way they can do that is to cut your deltoid off and peel it off the bone and then cut the end of your acromion off to make more space. So I was probably 1 year removed from when they started figuring out how to scope a shoulder. But like I had this, horrendous shoulder surgery from benching, and I went from benching, with a grip this wide to close gripping like this, and it's like all that stuff, but it was all learning, right? It's all part of the experience. The problem with, what do they say? Experience is wasted on the young, right? And, there's so many people who don't want to listen to you in spite of the fact, like I tell people all the time, trust me, I did this already. I've already been down this road. I've had the bad back. I've had the bad shoulder. I've had the injections. I've had the surgeries. It's like, it's like when you know the end of the story and it's not good and everybody's insistent on, like, I always say it's like little kids trying to learn to tie their shoes. And they're like, I want to tie them myself. And you're like, just give me like 2 seconds. I can tie it for you and we can be on to the next thing. And instead they sit there and fumble for hours. That's a lot of it. And it's still, endemic in our profession. The crazy thing about our profession is that people don't learn.
I mean, how much selling do you have to do? I mean, since you're so well known and for all these years, I mean, guys coming in and you got to say to him, hey, listen, look, I don't like this kind of style going really heavy. We're not going to be maxing out with certain stuff. We're going to keep you more focused on your health. Do you find yourself still having to sell, or do you just pull that Godfather trick and just,
a lot of times like the juiced up powerlifter type guy who's still playing sports just doesn't bother with somebody like me. And we tend to get, the good thing is we get a pretty intelligent clientele, even like amongst our pro athletes. We get people who like, okay, this is the place to go if you want to keep playing, if you want to play for a long time. And so it's not hard, but we do, like, now it's harder, it kind of goes up and down in terms of, sometimes we'll lose out on young kids because they'll go to someplace else who'll fill their head up with bullshit. And then we get them later, they get hurt with somebody else. They're like, oh yeah, Mike's laughing, right? But oh yeah, I went and trained with so-and-so, and he was all about, the heavy back squats, blah, blah, blah. But then I hurt my back, and then so-and-so said I should come and see you. So now I'm like, I'll wait, they'll be there. The good thing for us is that our business is very fundamentally solid. So I need to pursue people who don't want to be there. I just have to sort of wait for the people to show up. And generally speaking, they, enough of them show up to keep us in business, which is all I'm really worried about. I've given up competing with people and trying to argue. I mean, I argue sometimes. I argue for sport on Twitter. I think it's one of my favorite things to do. So sometimes I will argue just for the sake of argument, but in general, I don't bother too much.
So, I mean, then with your business, I mean, you get a lot of people that just keep returning time and time again. Are you doing much in terms of advertising out? Like, is there a
we don't
focus on that?
We spend $0 a year on advertising.
Awesome.
It's almost 100%. We do a lot of social media though. So we've learned, the one thing I've also done is I've been a good early adopter. So I was very early on social media. I pay attention to what's going on. I got involved. I remember I paid attention to Ryan Lee when the same thing, the people used to think Ryan Lee was a clown. Like, he's a clown. He doesn't know what he's doing. He clowned his way to a couple $1 million in the fitness field and then a couple more million in the business field. But I hooked up with Ryan really early on and started going to like his marketing events and started thinking about, writing books, selling, people he's always selling something. I'm like, yeah, what's wrong? Like, if you're good at something and you know something, what is wrong with recording that and selling it to somebody? Everybody does it, right? I mean, does anybody get pissed about a band? Oh, they're really good, but shit, they record their stuff and then they make you pay for it. Oh, they should just go around and play for free, right? They should just do free concerts everywhere. And
Sure.
you just go and then they live in a van and they don't eat. It's like, but in our industry, we're like, coaches are supposed to be dumb and poor. And so when you realize that you have to not be poor anymore, the poor people get offended.
I see this as a huge virtue signal though in this industry. Like they love, like, you know, everyone's saying, oh, I worked this many years for free and all that. Like they're trying to, it's like a cock size contest. But at the end of the day, you're the only one that's struggling, not being able to feed yourself. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, and I started out early. I bought houses. I renovated houses. You know, my wife and I have been doing real estate, you know, flipping houses before it was HGTV popular. We've probably owned 40 houses in our life.
Get out of here.
Wow.
You know, it was like, I wanted to make a life, a living. You know, I wanted to be able to have a reasonable, I didn't care about being rich, but I wanted to have a reasonable standard of living. And, you know, I worked 2 jobs till I was 54. I think that was when I quit the Red Sox, 2013, 53. So 2013 season, I stopped working for the Red Sox. And that was the first time since I was 20 that I had 1 job. And that's if you consider what I do 1 job in terms of, you know, running a business and running a website and writing and speaking. You know, I probably had 5. I'm like, I don't know if you remember the old Jamaicans on Saturday Night Live skit, but that was kind of me. You know, it was like I had 5 jobs, but I kind of went to 1 relatively full-time job. But yeah, I mean, people, like, you're right. People, I mean, it's like people love to talk about how hard they work and how little money they make. And sometimes I look and think, I don't know if you should brag about that.
Yeah. It's a shame with the industry, but I know a lot of coaches that Buddy Morris, for instance, he's a phenomenal coach, good trainer. And you can't be a worse businessman than Buddy, right? He had his own gym. I told him, I said, Buddy, don't open a gym. He opened a gym. And he says, when I was there, it failed miserably. Now his stepson Fred is running everything while he's in Arizona, and Fred's doing a fine job. But Buddy's not a businessman. Coaches should either take on a partner or learn business in order to, in one way or another. You took on a partner, but it seems like you're pretty business savvy too.
Right. And I think the reason I took on a partner is because I'm pretty business savvy. You know, because I realized right away what I didn't want to do. And I didn't want to be stuck in the office, you know, adding up checks and figuring out who paid and who didn't pay and all that stuff. And Bob, my partner, didn't want to be a strength and conditioning coach. I always tell people when you get into these partnerships, the last thing you want as a partner is another strength and conditioning coach, because 100%. You're going to fight all the time about who does what. If you want to develop, that's like, you know, you want a person who's willingly going to do the other part so that you can do your part. Like what I want to do is coach and do coach education. That's what I want to do. I don't want to worry about, you know, the minutia. I do, like I said, I have to worry about the minutia to some degree, but it's not ultimately my responsibility. But the other part of that is if you do get a partner, you've got to be willing to you've got to give that person some autonomy. I always tell people the story, like Bob is different than I am. And I can remember distinctly one day we were talking about, he's like writing up a bank deposit and he's like writing all the checks and he's writing it on a deposit slip. And I was like, Bob, why don't you get one of those check scanner things where you can just whip the checks through, you know, and they go right into our account. And he's like, no, I like making the deposit. I like doing this. And I was kind of like, okay, that's great. You like that? No problem. Because I'm not doing that. If it was me, I would figure out some way to do it faster or make it easier for me. But he said he likes doing it that way. So I was like, okay, I'm not, you know, that's not part of my sort of part of the business. So I'm not going to get involved in that. And I think that's hard because the thing, and I've said this on a lot of podcasts, the biggest problem with our field is that a lot of people go into it based on their own ego. You know, they start lifting because they don't feel good about themselves or they want to be something they think they're not good at. There's some sort of insecurity that drives them into the field. And in a lot of ways that never gets out for some people. So they're always kind of dragging that insecurity around with them everywhere that they go. Like I always said, you know, with people, like I laugh and I've said this a million times, but like if you're still posting pictures of yourself with your shirt off and, you know, like maxing on the bench or your deadlift, I'm like, you got to get a life. Okay. You know, you just got to start acting like an adult. Adults don't talk about how much they can bench. Like you don't go to a party with people, you know, that are your kids' parents and be like, what do you bench? You know, I benched 400 once, you know, meat, no shirt. You know, and someone like what? Like, what exactly are you talking about? But, you know, you see people and like this becomes their whole, like their sole kind of source of conversation, and their, you know, it's what really populates their world for them. And I look at it, I can go to a bunch of people from the town that I live in, and no one will know what I do. No one will know anything about me except that I'm Mark's dad or I'm a dad or whatever it is. And people walk in sometimes and be like, I thought you owned a little gym, you know, and they're looking, and I'm like, well, I own a gym. It's just not little, you know. It never, you know, I wasn't like, you know, I don't say this, oh, it's 20,000 square feet, you should see it. You know, I got 20 employees. Like, there's no need to talk about any of that stuff in my mind. But there's so much, like I said, our field is just so much ego-driven bullshit, you know, like grown men, mostly men, unfortunately, thank God, not women, you know, bragging about things that no one cares about.
Oh, yeah. So could we get like a little flex from you, Mike? Like, I mean, you started off in a 700 square foot place. For the young people that are listening to it, they should be inspired by your story. I mean, what have you managed to build in your near 61 years?
We have a 22,000 square foot facility is one. The other one is 7,000 square feet. We've got probably over the course of a year, we probably have 1,000 something clients that come in and out. I don't want to talk revenue numbers, but we've been, I said before we get on, we've generated a profit every year since 1997, and we've grown at least 5% a year every year since 1997. If you know anything about the idea of compound interest, that's a lot of growth. So, I mean, we're what you'd call a mid-sized company right now if you were a business person. You know, we're probably a large, small business. But, you know, we've got our own certification program that's going to be a six-figure business in the not too near future. We've got a lot of things going on. If you want to flex, I've written 4 books. They're in probably 12 languages, I think now. You know, probably made, I don't even know how many, you know, I mean, started out making VHS tapes, so you can figure out how long ago that was. I made VHS tapes, then I made DVDs. Now we make downloadable products. So I've run the gamut of marketing from what you could put in your VCR to what you can download to your computer. So you know, we've been able to do quite a bit. And the good thing is now I've got like an amazing second generation of coaches working with me. So when I'm done, what we're doing is going to continue. And I think that's the biggest thing when you start thinking about whatever legacy is, that, okay, is it, you know, does it all end with you? And if you look at like the Kevin Carrs and the Brendan Rearichs and Steve Bigelow and all these guys that I have working for me, we're going to be, we've become what I wanted to be. I used to tell people all the time that I wanted Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning to be a brand, like, you know, like Toyota is a brand, or like, you know, whatever, Apple is a brand. You know, you want people to think when I hear that name, I think of a quality product. I don't think of Mike Boyle. And I think we've gotten to that point where, you know, people don't come. Some kids, I actually had a kid one time, I had to show my ID to prove it was me. He was like, Mike Boyle doesn't even exist. Mike Boyle's not even a real guy. I literally went in and got my license out of my, I have just a money clip. I don't even have a wallet. And I came up, I said, I'm telling you, I'm Mike Boyle. And the kid kind of looked at me and goes, well, I guess you are. It says it on your driver's license. But he's in the gym. I had another girl one day. I'm like, because a lot of times I'll just hang around in like flip-flops and an old hooded sweatshirt. And one of the girls went to one of the other coaches and was like, some rando old guy in a hoodie just came over and told me what to do. And the kid who was working was like, oh, the rando, was it a red hoodie? And she's like, yeah, it was a red hoodie. He's like, and he had flip-flops on. And he kind of needed a shave. And they were like, oh, that was Mike. So you should probably listen.
Some rando.
And so did you have a strategy to, when you know, maybe not when you first started off, but in the early days, did you have a strategy to get to where you wanted to get to right now? Or was you just churning the hours away in the gym and, you know, took some opportunities when they arose?
I had one strategy, which was not to fail.
Okay.
Really. You know, so there really wasn't, there was not any sort of kind of grand master plan to this thing at all. And we had a lot of bumps in the road, and we moved locations probably, I think, since we started in 97, we've probably been in 4 different places. You know, we had lost our lease. You know, we had lots of the same disasters that everybody else has. But the one thing, and I said, I have perfected business. And it is so simple. I always laugh at people and think, it's like, if you charge a fair price and you treat your customers well and you treat your employees well, you're going to be really successful in business. And people look at that sometimes and think, oh, it's not that simple. I'm like, yeah, it actually is. You know, if you just charge people a fair price and you treat them well, you treat people the way you would want to be treated, and you treat your coaches the way you would want to be treated, you're going to do fine. And the people that tend to screw it up are people that either charge too much money, or they treat people like shit, or they treat their employees like shit. And then they wonder why they're struggling. And I'm like, you're struggling because business is actually fairly simple in that sense. And you don't need, it's not like super complicated, particularly I guess the other thing is you have to have a good product. So that's the fourth piece of the puzzle. But, if you have all of those things, you're going to be okay if you're willing to take a long view. And that's kind of what we did. We always said, like, we're never going to take we're not going to take shortcuts. We're not going to sell out. We had rules like parents couldn't watch, and, parents would come in and say, but I want to see. And I'm like, we can't. I used to tell them, you can watch one. You watch one workout. After that, you gotta go, whatever, sit in the car, sit out front, but you're not going to follow the coach around and watch what we're doing. And it was kind of like, hey, if we lose some clients because of the way we're going to conduct ourselves, and even with the way the athletes were going to conduct themselves, like we said, you can't swear, you can't throw weights on the ground. Even for us, like, you can't wear a tank top. You can't wear lifting gloves. You can't have your, now I used to say you can't have your Walkman on, Mike. You'll appreciate that. But you can't have your ear pods in. Like, there's all these things. You can't listen to music with obscenities in it. Like, we have a series of rules, and we stick by the rules. Like, if someone plays music that is not fitting, they know I'm going to give them shit. They know I'm going to walk over and be like, what happened? How did that music get over the speakers? You won't hear WAP at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, more than likely.
Just the after hours, mate, huh?
Yeah. No, after hours, it's the hits of the 70s. It's like the Bridge or 70s disco. But so it was all that stuff. Like, I think you have to have, I'm filled with cliches, but if you have for something or you don't stand for anything, right? Like, you have to decide these are the things that are going to be important, and these are the things that I'm willing to fight with you about. And if you don't like it, go someplace else. The interesting thing is, I think when you do that, people want to be where you are that much more. Brian Lee used to call it velvet rope money. Yeah. When you go to the club and there's that rope and there's that doorman, and if you just walk up to him and you like give him the the right high sign, he just pulls the rope back and you go walking in. Otherwise it's like, hey, get in line with all the other schmucks down there. And people love that. Like, they want to be where they perceive that there is some cachet that is, it's better. Like, we don't just anybody getting along with all the other people. And
so when did you decide to bring on a partner?
Pretty much right away, almost right away when I did it. Bob was a partner. So originally, this is how far back it goes, but Bob was a partner in an acceleration franchise for Peoration, which I think is now Blue Streak or something, the high-speed treadmills and all that stuff. And the guy that was the majority partner tried to sell me the business without telling Bob. He came to me and he said, hey, you interested in buying this business? And at that time I thought, this is kind of an attractive idea. Maybe I buy some like existing franchise or whatever. But so I sort of started looking into it, and then I realized that's probably not what I want. And about 6 months later, they went under, or they were in the process of going under. And I went to them and I made some business with no money. I went to them and proposed. I said, hey, if you guys basically give me 50% ownership, I'll bring all my business here and I'll get you guys out of the hole. You guys, because they were at the point of losing, at that time, a decent amount of money apiece. And Bob was one of the original investors. His kid was actually, I coached his son. His son played for us at B in the 90s and was on like our 95 national championship team. And so, you know, one thing leads to another, and they kind of take me in as a partner. And eventually I buy everybody out but Bob, because I really like Bob. The other guys were silent partners, and they were good guys, but, you know, they were just more, they had done it as an investment or for money, or their kids were involved or whatever. Now their kids are older, they're not involved. So we kind of got everybody out, and Bob and I have pretty much stayed partners the whole time. So.
And what does Bob handle now with
everything besides training? So all of the money, literally, somebody who was a real business person would be embarrassed at how little I know about our business, you know, in terms of, like you were saying, ask me money, you know, what's your overhead? I'm like, I don't know. I know one figure, gross revenue. And I know if gross revenue goes up every year, everything else probably goes up with it. You know, a rising tide raises all boats. It would be very difficult for us to increase our gross and not increase our net, because we run it, you know, we run a pretty tight ship in terms of we don't waste money. And, you know, it's that same thing with business too. You realize why big businesses fail, because it's somebody else's money. People have no problem, you know, going out and, you know, doing whatever, you know, flying first class and doing all this other stuff, because what do they care? You know, it's not their money. In our situation, it's all our money. So that makes you much more conscientious about what you're going to do from everything. You know, I was emptying the trash today, and actually Bob's wife still works in the office with us too. And she was like, "You're not supposed to be emptying the trash." I'm like, "But the trash is full." So it needs to get emptied, which means I'm going to take that plastic bag out of that trash can, and I'm going to put a new plastic bag in, and I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to throw it in the dumpster, because that's what needs to be done right now, so that there's not paper towels all over the floor. You know, and that's, you know, again, those are the things I think that make you successful in the long run in business. It's this thing, it's like so cliche, but, you know, don't ask anybody to do anything you wouldn't do yourself, right? You know, I could have just yelled at some intern like, "Oh, go clean, you know, get that trash outside." But I'd rather the intern sees me pull the trash out and take it out and realize, "Oh, I should have done that," instead of me. You know, the message is completely 180 degrees different in terms of, they see me take the trash out and they think, "Wow, Mike's willing to take the trash out," you know, and walk it out to the dumpster and stick it in there. And I didn't do that, versus, you know, if I'd come in and big time them and said, "Hey, intern, you know, how come that barrel's full?" They would have been like, "Hey, Mike's a real dick, you know, and he thinks he's too good to take the trash bag out." And all that stuff plays into developing a culture in a business, and teaching people how you want them to treat other people.
Sure.
That's part of what it is too, in terms of the coaches. People always rave about, like, when they meet our coaches, what great, like, they're so great. I love them. You know, they're such great people. And I'm like, yeah, because that's why we hire them. We hire them because they're great people. We don't hire them necessarily, you know, because they're great lifters or because they look really good in a t-shirt or whatever. You know, we hire them because they're really good people. I always, you know, I have the same, like I said, I always say, I can make you smarter. I can't make you nicer. And, you know, I can teach you easily, but I can't change your personality very easily.
Yeah, well, that's another one of the most impressive things that you've managed to do, because you've churned out a bunch of great coaches over the years. And my question that I wanted to bring up is, I mean, you mentioned all these different income streams that you've got and as part of your business. And I'm sure other people have recommended, why are you going to still spend a lot of time in the gym when you could probably earn more money just by writing stuff and using the digital service? How much time are you actually spending in the gym coaching now?
I'm probably in the gym coaching, I'm going to say, let's say, I'm probably in there 20 hours, give or take. You know, which is, I figure, which now, if I wanted to work a 40-hour week, is about half my week. You know, the other half spent doing stuff like this, playing around on my computer, you know, whether it's podcasts or whatever, you know, writing, speaking, doing that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty even split. The thing with me is, I really like coaching. I don't think I like coaching full time anymore. I don't think I want to coach, you know, I wouldn't want to coach 40 hours. I wouldn't want to be like group after group all day kind of thing. I feel like I'm too old now. I don't have that oomph anymore. Mm-hmm. But I like, you know, in the morning, we have a group of like NHL, AHL guys. And then we have a group of what we would consider our elite women. Like we've got one of the best women's lacrosse players in the world, and we've got a bunch of the best women's hockey players in the world. And, you know, I get to work with, and then I go in later in the day with my son and his friends, which is a totally different animal, because now I'm with, you know, 50 boys, a lot of them with since they were 12, kind of watching them grow up. And that's kind of cool. So it's, I can pick and choose a little bit more what I want to do and what I don't want to do, which is nice. And no one can buy me. Like you can't, no, there is no price for Mike Boyle personal training you. Like you can't come up and be like $1,000 an hour for Mike to train me by himself. It's like, nope, not happening. There is no price. I'd rather do it. I always tell people if people really want a session, I'll do it for free, but I don't want to do it for money, because as soon as I establish the price, someone will then decide they want to meet that price. So it's,
So you don't want to do any personal training one-on-one. You'll do all groups though.
Yeah, I do all group stuff. Occasional, Alex, no, I trained Daniel Sturridge for a while when he was rehabbing. And that was one-on-one that I did. You know, I'll do one-on-one stuff that I like the girl Kayla trainer, who I think might be the best offensive player in the history of the women's lacrosse game. I trained her one-on-one for a long time when she was rehabbing from ACL. But I want to do that I like versus things that, you know, somebody's saying how much money to do this. I don't want to get involved in the trading money for services industry at this stage, because what you realize is there's always somebody who will try to kind of win that trade. So I've gotten out of it. I have one personal training client. I've been training this guy for 25 years. He's like a world famous plastic surgeon. I meet him now we're meeting at 6:30 in the morning, which is great. For years it was 5:15, and he was like a solid 3-day-a-week guy at 5:15. I'd get up at 4:40, but it was the same thing. It's like street credibility in the gym, because when people see me in the gym at 5:15 with a client, they're like, man, Mike just opened the gym at 5:15, you know, and then people like say, oh, you're there all day. And I'm like, man, that's all mirrors. I'm not here all day. I'm here till 6:30, you know, and then I go home and I get my son on, drive to school, you know, I do a whole lot of stuff. And then maybe I come back again or at 9, and then I leave again, and then I come back again at 4. But people see you there all day and they think, wow, the guy never leaves. And I'm like, oh, I leave a lot. I leave more than I stay, but you're just not really paying attention.
So let me ask you, I've noticed when I overwhelm my guys with single leg split squats, and I was just talking about this with Cal Dietz a couple of weeks ago, all my guys, sacroiliac joint dysfunction goes through the fucking roof. What do you see? I know this is a big exercise. This is a big staple in your program.
Couple of things. One thing, we don't do it with a bar in the back, which I think a bar on the back does put you into, you know, what I would kind of call like a bow and arrow type posture, because you've got that leg behind you and then you've got the bar in the back. So we are dumbbells exclusively, and we're dumbbells exclusively because of Joe, which is really interesting, because Joe one time posted a video of one of his guys with like 120 dumbbells cranking out split squats. And I was like, wow, I never really thought about, you know, pushing it to that level. And at that time we were doing what everybody else was doing. We were doing, you know, split squat, barbell. And you'll appreciate this. The reason we don't use a bar is the SI journey, the postural thing, because we had a guy, one of our players, kid that went on to play NHL, who I will just say wasn't the brightest bulb in the room. And he got stuck in the split squat, and he immediately let go of the bar and grabbed the side rails with it. Oh, like exactly, that was my face, right? So I look over there, and he's stuck in the rack. He's got 280 pounds, and it's teetering, and he's kind of trying to like hold it with his shoulders and with his neck, and he's got his hands on the rack. And all I'm thinking about is fingers, like fingers on the floor. Like when this bar falls off, this kid's going to get his fingers chopped off, because there's going to be no way that he can get out of this position that he's in. Like this is going to be, it's going to end so badly, right? And I always tell people, like Murphy's Law, like, you know, when you think like, what's the stupidest thing anybody could ever do? Some guy, one of your athletes is going to do that. Like he's going to do that exact thing that you think no one would ever be that stupid to like let go of the bar and grab the side rails, right? But that's exactly what this kid did. And after that, I was like, never again. I'm not having, like, I was looking at your face. It was so funny, but that was me. I literally had to leave the room. After we got it all squared away, I had to get out of the room for a minute. I was like, I think I'm going to throw up. Like I just thought about like this kid chopping like both of his hands off or all his fingers or whatever it was when that bar got ditched onto the, the safety rails. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm a headline in every strength and conditioning newspaper because I'm the guy who's, had the guy lose 10 fingers in a split squat accident. And so we went to all dumbbells. The other thing is we have a relatively short stance. We do not let them get that back. The back hip is just, or the back knee, I would say, is just a degree or two posterior to the hip. So we're never going to let them get into a really big angle where the knee is, say, 20, 30 degrees back. And I feel like if the combination of the bar in the back and that knee being too far back may torque somebody's SI joint up. But because we're always short and always front loaded, we don't get it. The other thing, and this goes, so it's kind of like, so I wrote an article about squats versus deadlifts. And it used to be, I said, one of the things that I said is it used to be if the bar's on your back, it's a squat. If the bar's on your hands, it's a deadlift. That was sort of the simple way to put it. But then we started doing things like, like a rear foot elevated split squat or a split squat, suitcase style. And now you had somebody who was doing a squat pattern, but they were doing it with the weight in their hands. And suddenly you look and think, well, does that make it a rear foot elevated deadlift because he's holding the weight in his hands? And people are like, no, look at it. It's definitely a squat. And I'm like, okay, so what makes a squat and what makes a deadlift a deadlift? If I'm a sumo deadlift, it's like trap bar. People would be like, trap bar, you can't squat your trap bar deadlift. I'm like, why not? Like, what's the rule on trap bar? Like, there's a rule, like it has to look like a deadlift. Or if I got a tall guy, like if I got Bob Love, like you do, oh no, Bob, sorry, I'm going with the dad's name. Like how old I am. But you know what I mean? If I have that guy, who's all legs and segmentally, not that normal, can I not let him squat his deadlift? And so, we started like just stumbling around like, hey, what really makes a squat? And Dan, John, and Pavel in I think it was Easy Strength or one of their books said basically deep movement of the knees and hips is a squat. And movement that centers around the hips primarily is a deadlift. And I was like, okay, that's a pretty good rule. The difference with loading suitcase style or, trap bar deadlifting or whatever it is that your back is now undergoing flexion moments, right? You're being pulled forward. I think that drastically changes the load on your spine versus when you're trying to hold that spinal extension and balance a load on top. That drastically changes the load on your spine because now you've got big shear forces pushing you forward from a point, like say C7 kind of area. And you've got compression. And I always said the spine doesn't like shear, it doesn't like compression, it doesn't like torque. If we think about barbell squatting, you've got all three. Even if you think about deadlifting, like trap bar deadlifting, a trap bar is 5 feet long. A squat bar is 7 feet long. In a trap bar, the load is contained in about a 48-inch area. In a squat bar, the load is contained in about a 6-foot area, right? Or 5.5-foot area. If we think about the torque production capability of a barbell, conventional bar, straight bar versus a trap bar, it's really, really different. If we think about the torque production capability of a barbell on your back versus suitcase-held dumbbells, it's really drastically different. So I think the small differences that people don't think about end up being really big differences for us. So we don't see any of that at all, which is really interesting.
What do you see?
We still see, I think, back pain, but not as much SI-related back pain. I think, back pain is kind of ever present. But we don't, in all honesty, I hate to say it, but we're pretty darn healthy because it's such a big consideration for us. We're always thinking like, okay, what is the the risk benefit of any particular thing that we're going to do? So we don't see, we used to have a lot of shoulder tendonitis back in the 90s. And then we started doing, we started really changing what we were doing from a pulling perspective. And suddenly our shoulder tendonitis went away. We don't see a lot of back pain. I'm trying to think like if you really said, I couldn't even tell you what I think our predominant injury probably is. I think hip pain because we've got a lot of hockey players. So I think we're always going to have that kind of, we're going to have to be respectful of people's hips. But even there, I think much less than average in terms of, it's rare that we have somebody who'll have hip surgery, which where in some programs you'll see 3 or 4 people have surgery a year, you know, in any given program. So you're talking about somebody who, you know, 10% of their athletes are getting some kind of hip reconstruction being done.
So I'm currently in school for acupuncture, and I'm diving deep into the bodywork aspect of things because I'm the guy per hour, right? Like, you know, these guys are calling me up. Hey, something's messed up. I need a one-on-one session with you. Even though we have groups at my gym, I'm kind of becoming that dude, the Mr. Fix-It, when I got to clean up everyone else's spilled milk. You never really dove into the manual therapy world, or did you?
You know, I mean, I never did personally, although I will say yes. Well, there's 2 things. One, I do tons of manual therapy. Probably I'm a certified athletic trainer, or I was until last year. I finally let my certification lapse, and I've been certified since, I think, 1981. And so kind of technically, I guess I could put my hands on people, maybe. Probably not really. But I would always do soft tissue work on people. Like my athletes, you know, I'd work on people's hips, I'd work on people's back, I'd work on people, you know, muscle energy stuff, you know, SI resets, all that kind of stuff. I did all that stuff on my own all the time. But I also have a very small list of really good therapists that I work with. So when something gets beyond my skill level, I can go and say, okay, you know, this person needs to see this person. And I've learned that has been a huge learning experience for me. There's a guy I always say, this guy named Dan Dyrek, who I always call the smartest guy no one's ever heard of. But Dan's one of these guys who was so good at that individual therapy thing that teams would hire him. You know, Larry Bird, he kept Larry Bird playing in the, I guess, 80s for the Celtics. And then Bird hired him, so he worked for the Pacers, but lived in Boston and would literally fly back and forth. And then he trained one of the Pacers guys who had started out as a ball boy, this guy, Donnie Strack. Donnie's a great guy, but he's medical director for Oklahoma City Thunder. But he was like one of Dan's guys who Dan trained, who then went on to, you know, to his own gig in pro sports. But I would take guys to Dan all the time and learn. And I mean, if you pay attention, you learn. And you learn about manual therapy, and you learn about when to stretch and when not to stretch, and when to do soft tissue work and when not to do soft tissue work. And you know, we were very able to manage that. That's the reason we foam roll. The reason we're such big foam rolling people is because I realize now, this is going back probably, I don't know, maybe early 2000s. I remember Mike Clark talking about self-myofascial release with a foam roller. And this is like NASM Mike Clark, you know, going back quite a while. And I remember thinking we were bringing in a massage therapist for our pro guys. And we were having really good luck with the massage therapy, with getting rid of, you know, kind of all the junk that guys had. And I said, gee, I'd really like to figure out a way to do this for everybody. And initially, I actually thought about developing a relationship with a massage school. And that didn't end up, you know, I was like, I don't really think I can pull this off in terms of the school and the kids and waivers. And then suddenly the foam roller thing popped up. And I was like, foam rolling, man, this is like poor man's massage therapy. So, you know, we went like all in on foam rolling. Because, you know, it's like people said, it's bad massage, but it's massage. It's way better than no massage. You can think if there's a very inappropriate analogy that you guys are probably going to come up with in your own mind as I say this, but I'm not going to say in the podcast, but it's the same idea, right? Like, you know, you got it at least. I don't know. Mike might be a step behind, but I might have to cue him in later. But it's but we started making everybody foam roll, and, you know, really getting after like their junky spots, their places where they hurt. And I mean, we've probably been rolling our groups for almost 20 years. But that was in response for the need, like you said, Mike. There's always people that need you, and that's like Kevin Carwin. We've got probably 5 or 6 guys now that have become LMTs on our staff for that reason, to have the legal right to put their hands on people.
Yeah. Because
you can get yourself into trouble. And I'm lucky in the sense that I probably did some things that maybe I shouldn't have done at different times in my career, from the standpoint of putting my hands on people and doing massage work when maybe that wasn't, if scope of practice really exists, I might have violated it at that time. But, we've now got people that can do that, and we've got people on staff that can do it. So it could be like, hey, go set up an appointment with Kevin and let him get in there and work on X, Y, Z. We'd love to have a staff acupuncturist, Mike, in case you get, if you get bored, because I could always use a good homeless guy who could live in a cardboard box out back.
You'll look smart in your flip-flops then next to this one, walking around barefoot the whole time.
Hey, that's what they tell you. You want to be the smartest guy in the room, you just got to pick the right room.
Exactly. Listen, I know we don't have you for much longer, but for the young guys that reach out to you, or guys that come into your mentorship programs or coaching and education, and they want to get involved in building personal training as a career, what do you tell them?
I tell them, read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Because it's all about, like I always tell people, it's all about someone wanting to spend time with you. That's what it really comes down to. Because if you're an asshole, people are not going to pay you for your time. Maybe if you're really, really good, you can get away with it and you'll still get people who want to pay you. But in general, people like to be around people that they. Sure. So it's not like it's so not about like how you look. It's so about all of those things. And it is so much about, a really good person, being somebody that someone can rely on is what is really going to make you successful. I don't care what field that is. If you asked me for the same advice, about being a salesman, I'd tell you probably the exact same thing. If you asked me same advice on being a coach, sport coach, I'd tell you the exact same thing. I think it's always going to come down to your ability to interpersonally relate to the people that you're going to deal with, because that's what will make you long-term successful.
Yeah. This is what me and Mike always say. Like, the truth to it, in my opinion at least, is they need to feel better than when they walked in. And if you keep doing that over and over and over again, they're going to associate every time they see you, they're automatically feeling better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I tell our clients that my acid test, how do you feel when you get out of bed? I want them to feel better when they get out of bed. If you get clients, because they'll tell their friends. People will tell their friends when they're out of pain. Just like they tell their friends when they're in pain, they'll tell their friends when they're out of pain. And as soon as their friends start saying, oh my God, my back, my knee, whatever, they're going to be like, you should go to Mike Boyle's. And that's what you want them to say. You want them to associate, like you said, you with feeling better. And you want to associate them, people always talk about, Alan Cosgrove talks about the idea of, you want to be that third place, like Starbucks talks about. And you want to be that place where people can go and feel comfortable, because again, a lot of times people say in the gym where there's athletes, the average fitness person isn't going to feel comfortable. But you can come in, people come in our place and there's like guys just walking around, doing their workout, doing their thing, and it's not any big deal. And they know the people, they know the moms and dads that are in there, and they talk to them, and, they do their work and you do your work and everybody's happy. But like I said, there's no there's no hard bullshit in our place. There's no freaking chalk flying and people throwing shit on the ground. And I always tell people, I'm like, hey, save that for someplace else. Trust me, somebody saw you lift the weights. You don't need to throw them on the ground to make sure they looked. Because that's all that bullshit is about, right? Like, you throw it on the ground because you want everybody to look over and realize how much weight it was. And it's kind of like, trust me, if they were going to be impressed, they were. If they weren't, they weren't. And you tossing the weights around just makes them think you're. But we got a lot of dinks in our field. I mean, just so many that it's another one of my many cliches, right? In the shallow pool, the midget stands tall. You don't have to be really, really good in our field to be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Coach, we will let you go on that. You said an hour. We gave you the hour. Thank you so much. Yeah. We really appreciate you.
Pleasure. I could have done this. I could have done another hour with you two.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you on again, man.
Well, let me know when you're ready. When you're ready to recycle some guests, you can tweet me back.
Thanks so much, mate. Really.
All right,
pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you, Alex. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, buddy.
I'll see you.
Thanks, Coach.
Cheers, bud.